Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rash's World. Today we have two special guests on Rash's World on a very interesting and important topic. So we have Rob Grover and Gary Logan. Welcome to Rash's World.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having me.
you.
What I'd like you to do, each of you here, to get acquainted with you is how would you briefly describe yourself? What do you do? Or anything else you want to share here on the Rash's World?
We are spiritual advisors for CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs,
Visionaries.
movers, shakers, high achievers, actors, athletes, and we guide people through deeply transcendental psychedelic plant medicine journeys so that they can really ground in their visionary reality into form.
Wonderful. And so you're the founders of the Journeymen Collective. What's that about?
Just as Robert says, I'd say it's a personal development program with the use of psychedelics, but the psychedelics is, I think, a minor role in the whole process. Working with us, we work on the side of developing your spiritual, your mental, your physical, and your emotional levels of being, other than just coming in for a journey. You're coming in more than just the experience of the psychedelics of the mushrooms. You're coming in to work with Rob and Gary to develop your life in a direction that you want or you see how it's going to move forward.
Mm-hmm. That sounds fascinating. But before we get into the details, how did you get embarked on this path? Because that is something that I'm very curious about. How did it all start for you guys?
Yeah, for me, my spiritual journey took place or started consciously, like actually studying spirituality, different metaphysical teachings and whatnot, and personal development about 20 years ago. And then that led me into leaving the corporate world to start my own career coaching business. And then within that, I felt like there was still something that was missing inside of that. And so I started doing spiritual, metaphysical healing and whatnot with people from all around the world. And then even inside of that, I still felt like there was something missing. I went on a journey and worked with a medicine man one-on-one, came out of that, and I saw myself the very next day. I was in a meditation and I saw myself training with him, and I called him up and asked him, will you teach me how to guide people through journeys? And he said, absolutely. And so started working with him, and that's
I guess I always say personal development or exploration of myself was probably in theater school when I was 17 years old. And ever since then, it's been a development of who am I and letting go of the stuff that no longer serves me and discovering, well, that didn't feel right or that response wasn't good. But throughout those years, I worked in theater and I fell in love with a program called the Alexander Technique, which is a mind-body conscious awareness training. And we incorporate that in the work that we do. I've been teaching probably over 20 years and been with the program for about 35 years. So really integrated my life. And from there, after seeing Robert's exploration in a journey, when he came back, he changed. He was different. We always jokingly say he found his joy spot. But I thought, well, maybe I need to shift some stuff. I was going through a little bit of depression. My mother had passed away. She had lived with us for about 4 years, so we were her caregivers, and having that empty space around the house did sort of set a bit of grief in. And so I went on the journey with the same medicine man. And in that process, I was also shown that this is the path that we are supposed to be on. So I wrote it in my journal and eventually spoke to Robert about it. And he says, I know, because we never spoke about it before on what we discovered in the journey. And then we both had the same sort of outcome on how we're supposed to move forward in the world and what we're supposed to offer. So that leads us to where we are now after 6 years in the work with the Journeymen Collective. And it's growing and expanding and
I find it fascinating how from different fields and professions we kind of we converge, and
Yes.
from divergent professions, and we follow the same path. Something like, again, coaching or spirituality and so on. So and it's very interesting from, again, different backgrounds. I think Alexander himself was an actor, so it's kind of
Yes.
the inventor of the technique. So that's, again, also quite fascinating. And so I also like the fact that you're mentioning well, magic mushrooms. That's why I like prefer to call it instead of the scientific name, but as something as a tool and not as the actual thing, because that's important. It's very powerful. It
Hmm.
can lead you astray as well. It's not something to be played around with or trifled with, I think, and that's important. So how can you make sure, and what is your initiative here, of it doesn't go into the wrong direction, or it's not
Hmm.
used for recreational purposes only, because it's too
Mm,
valuable for that, I think.
That's right.
totally. Yeah. I think with us, one of the key things is there's a bit of a vetting process or an interview process
Mhm,
that we go through with our clients.
mhm,
And we really make sure that they are a fit for us and vice versa, that we can work with them, they can work with us. And a key piece of all of this is that, are you as an individual willing to take what you've learned in the journey and apply it into your life? And so we call it applied integration. Some people just call it integration, but for us, it's more about using the tool, using that exploration of self, because that's what the journey is there for, and really getting present to any limiting beliefs, any stuck energies of emotions, traumas and dramas from the past, and really clearing those out so that you can become more clear with self. And we often say that you're finding your true self because you're letting go of some of the projections that society and culture has put on you. And a big part of like what we really focus on is helping people ground in the whole entire experience. And so we guide people through preparation, we guide people when they're with us in person, and it's curated. That whole entire experience is really curated for people that we work with, because we've spent the time getting to know them. And it's not just dropping into a retreat center for 4 or 5 days. And then after, the key piece is really like, how is that individual, how is that unique individual going to implement that which they've learned? So we teach people how to synthesize and process the information that they've been presented, because they may not have any context for what was presented. So we're using all of our uh, all of our history in the metaphysical, personal, spiritual development world, and helping people funnel and channel that energy into their life, into their love, into their relationships, and into their businesses.
mhm. I think that's really important, that preparation, because there's also an element of trust that they need to have with you, and kind of rapport and connection, because that you had with the medicine man, you immediately already respected that person. So it's feeling like, I'm safe. This is a safe spot. And just my experience dates a couple decades back. And so the environment you're in and the people you're with is very important when you're in that kind of, I would say, fragile but very mind-opening and eye-opening state.
Yeah. Well said. Definitely. Yeah, that's what we've heard, that uh, trust is the main thing, and there in the environment is the main thing. The setting of the setting of the scene. You're not, which is, there's exploration. You can go to a yurt in the middle of the forest and do your thing, and that is one type of human that is drawn to that experience. We have chosen a different path to explore on that level of not being in a grass hut or a yurt or with 20 or 30 other people. We're with 1 to 4 individuals at a time during a journey with us.
Mm-hmm.
And are you on it as well as you're doing it, or do you refrain from using psilocybin as it's
It,
happening?
it depends on what the currents of energy are moving through us at the time. And we just know. And if it is, it's usually a very small amount, like what most people would call a microdose
Yeah.
amount. And because it's all just a frequency anyway. And so yeah, it's
And current research, I mean, when we look at psychotherapy, is trying to incorporate that, and there are various movements. And Michael Pollan had recently a book, and the Netflix show. I think the second chapter was related to psilocybin, and so it's quite fascinating that it's really coming into the mainstream, and there are people and again the psychotherapists talking about it. And when we look at the history of it, both in that program and also research that I've done, it's that we started off on the wrong foot. Timothy Leary, and they were enthusiastic about it, around us, but I think they took it overboard, and it scared people and became illegal since the 60s, 68, I believe, which is unfortunate because it could have been used for research, for again medicinal purposes and so on, but it stopped. And now we're kind of like catching up in many ways. And it looks good, though. I mean, the progress is made, and we're going, I believe, in the right direction of accepting it, embracing it more.
Yeah, totally. And I think a big part of that is like having, like we sort of touched on this before, but the guidance is key, and having someone there to work with you in preparation during the actual ceremonies as well, and treating it with a high level of respect. So you're not only respecting the individual that you're working with as a medicine man or a spiritual guide, but the respect is reciprocal in that you're also giving respect for the individual that is going into a really vulnerable state. And so we believe that it's one of the best ways to do it, because that's what we enjoy, is to do it in a high degree of comfort when you're processing some of those really uncomfortable aspects of self. And the guidance is really, really key. So who is guiding you? Do they have a depth of knowledge of the spiritual realms, of the mental, emotional, and the physical being that you are? Because no matter how many journeys you do, it's really about being like a fully actualized human being, and applying the knowledge that you've taken on during the actual journey.
Now, Gary, you mentioned trauma and so on, and then grief and mild depression, which I find very interesting because that's often not talked about. When you're either like high depression and you need help, or but the state, I think I was there a couple of years ago too, where you just like not enjoying life, and there is trauma behind it. There's a backstory that makes you feel that way, and so going through that through you personally, I think you can bond better, understand it better than somebody who just studies it, for instance. But how has that helped you personally also to deal with the trauma, and how do you help others to deal with theirs? What is your approach?
Well, it was like a quagmire around me. I was this gray cloud walking through, and I was like, okay, I can deal with a lot, but it looks like I'm having difficulty shifting this sort of stagnation in my life. And it's like, so with the journey, I went in with an open eye and mind, going, I'm able to release this stagnation in the journey process, whatever that looks like. I am open to it. And through that process, it came up a little bit of my journey. It came up that my mother and I had 100 lives together. Like, she was my mother, like 100 generations, you could, whatever you want to bring it together. And that came to a closure. And that action of closure sort of made, oh, okay, I'm able to release the grief of the loss of my mother, and knowing energetically she's still with me, and having that spiritual connection and that energy connection still reminds me that they're always with me. So it's knowing that they're not gone forever physically out of here, but spiritually, energetically, they're still here. So I think that was the coat that was I put on. It's like, okay, it's like the safe coat. And then it's like, okay, I can go through this and move forward. And now I know that I can call on her when I need to, if I'm in a situation that is undesirable. I'm not, or I'm going in a downward spiral. But that just hasn't happened. It's always been a growth from there, moving forward, going, I know what that feels like. This is not where I want to go. This is where I want to go. This is what it feels like. And then I move myself forward.
And I think to also add to that is when most humans, every single human that's walking the face of the planet has dealt with trauma in some degree, like whether it be like grandma slapped my hand when I reached for a cookie, and therefore I'll never ever reach for a cookie ever again, or never ever reach for my dreams. And then there's like severe like PTSD or complex PTSD. And I think our society, our culture doesn't necessarily know how to deal with a lot of those aspects. And a journey like this helps you to decompose any barriers that you have that you're holding on to. And sometimes it's just allowing someone to have the space just to have a really good cry. And through that cry, there's an observation or a witnessing of self in those different scenarios that we call trauma. And I think the springboard from that is recognizing that, oh, that was actually an experience for me to grow from and to learn from, so that I can help someone else who may have gone through that experience. And that's what we would call, like, that's the medicine that we come through, that those are the lessons, the learnings that we come through in our lives, so that we can possibly lend a helping hand to another human being that's in that same scenario.
Wonderful. And just the act of being born is trauma. And we all
I was
have that
just
in
going to
common.
say that to
Right?
you. It's
That's
like,
traumatic.
yeah, totally. You're coming out of a nice, safe, warm, dark environment, and you're pulled into the coldness and the light, and then you get a smack, and it's like, oh my God, how traumatic is that?
And they've checked it, because the stress response of newborns is really high. They're like an extreme toxic stress at that moment, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and that shift again. That's and so that's traumatic. But then it's also like what we go through our childhood, our friends, comment here and there, the teacher, and if we look back further into previous generations, and if we look back at like past lives, for instance, as well. So it's just like we all have trauma. Yes. This is like, it's normal to be traumatized in many ways.
I haven't met anybody who says they've had no trauma in their life.
They're probably lying if they.
They're lying. So it's like, you need to come on a journey.
Yeah, exactly. We'll show you. We'll show you.
We'll show you.
Yeah. Totally. And I think that, again, when you say about crying, I mean, as a guy, we don't feel comfortable doing that, and that's, again, not blaming anyone. This is the society we grew up in. Boys don't cry, and so on. And though that's shifting, but I think to have that space, well, yeah, it's okay, go ahead. I will cry with you. And so that really opens up to be exactly who you are and how you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'd like to know, like, what have been some of the experiences of people who've gone through that, and what have you seen? Are there any stories you'd like to share with us, anecdotes of these people whose outlook probably has changed, most likely has changed after this experience? What would you share with us here?
I think one of the things that a lot of people deal with, and it's varying degrees of grief, because that's another aspect of being human that we're never taught how to actually deal with it. And grief is typically like loss of a loved one, loss of a family member or a friend, or loss of relationships, loss of businesses, loss of, like, there's so many different ways that grief can take a hold, and then people don't understand what is actually holding them back. And if we look at yesteryear, whereby we lived in tribes, and there was always an initiation process for people to come through every like 3, 4 to like 7 years, and that process of initiation has been stripped away. So most of our people that come on journeys, it's not coming to work with us every single weekend. It's once every 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And with that, there's different levels of transformation, like people just having peace, discovering peace for the first time in their life, and they never knew what it felt like. and then being able to, like, we would call that a touchstone moment of being able to touch into that piece anytime that they come off center, when after they've left our center, where they come off center and they can remember back into, oh yes, I remember what peace
Kind of
felt like.
recalibrating, right? Like fine-tuning again, and it just goes out of whack and you come back, right?
Yeah, we always say the radio station is slightly off its mark. You just need to fine-tune it back into the frequency.
And
then but every 3 or 5 years makes sense for me. At some point, I was thinking like every year, but then every 3 or 5 years, I think that's better. But when I had the experience, for me, it was like integrating it into my life. It was not like something like two separate states. I want to have the same state, but without the tool anymore. I want to be independent and experience that. And it's like when you can reach that, then you don't need the tool anymore, right? To a certain extent.
Very much so.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think another piece, like I'm just thinking, it's challenging to like summarize all the different journeys. Like I think one of the things that people will really be focused on is that which they're passionate about, that which they're purposeful about in their love life, in their businesses, and that's where they'll sort of strip away the things that they don't really feel in alignment with anymore. And whether it be a company, or they go and create a new company, or they expand a company that they already have, but they take it in a more conscious direction, because they're more aware of, hey, my time on earth is limited, and I want to actually, we all have an intrinsic desire to make an impact. And if we can actually do that through the vehicle of a conscious business, then you're actually going to be using like your awareness of universal laws. And when we can become aware of that and have a visceral knowing of that within ourselves, then we can put that out into the world. So I think that's like a really high level answer to your question of the different levels of transformation that take place.
It's challenging being a human. I mean, I want to give a shout out to that, because you're born, we have trauma, and then you will die, you have trauma. And that's why when somebody dies, that grief, I think it's that recognition, like, this won't last forever, at least not in the same form and format, right? So I think really getting in touch with that, and the kind of the connection between the mind, body, and spirit is hugely important, because that gives you a certain kind of understanding, if you like, safety net, that it's okay. And even if death comes, it's fine, because it's not the end. But those kind of, I guess, the tool here opens you up to that and say, oh, there's another world beyond it, and another lifestyle, another way of thinking and being. What would you say about that? What's your
yes, and yes.
Okay.
Totally, you're on the mark. It is, but it's not hard. There's a way of explaining to regular folk that don't quite understand what we're talking about. So the idea is there's more than your reality that you're living in. And sometimes some people don't want to explore that, and they're happy to stay there, and that's okay. You're just hoping that the work that we're all doing, that will shed a light a little bit brighter for them to look over and, what was that about? And then they come into your space, and then you start sharing and nurturing these people to the direction of there's more. And there's always going to be more. You just have to make the choice, the conscious choice, on how you're going to live your life moving forward in this world. And what are you contributing to the world other than materialistic stuff, which we all like? We're not denying any of that. And that's what we're here for. We're here to enjoy every moment of life. Sure, is there sad moments? Of course. That's human. We're going to explore every gamut of emotion that we're here for. So it's like yes, and yes. It's like there's
and
so
now's
much.
the time. I mean, people wait till it's probably too late. They say, "Oh, I should have done this." Well, but do it now. And I think for those who are like mildly satisfied with their lives or mildly depressed, I mean, it's hard for them to go and seek professional help. It's like, yeah, doctor, I feel mildly depressed. I say, just go home. Don't waste my time. But in that sense, it's like, really, if there's something like, if you're not enjoying life, give this a shot. Give it a try and see what happens. I mean, you can always say no. It's not something, misconceptions one has. It's not that you will get immediately addicted to it and so on. And we have research that shows you that, especially, I mean, we're talking about magic mushrooms here.
That's correct.
So it's being open to that and say, give it a shot and see what happens. And you can always say no, and I'll never do it again. Or you can say, oh, this is interesting. It's a path I haven't thought about before.
Mhm.
Because
And
the
that was me
thought
at the
that you
beginning.
haven't had, it doesn't exist for you until you have it. And then you go, oh, new perspective.
Yeah. So at the beginning, it was like I sent Robert as the guinea pig. It's like, you go do that thing. It never crossed my mind ever to do it or come across it. It never brought into our field until this beautiful woman came into our life and introduced it to us and spoke to Robert about it. So that's why he went first. And then when I saw, honestly, the light went on, the transformation is like, holy shit. And it's like, mushrooms to that, but we knew there was more than just the mushroom part of it, the whole thing, the whole journey process. And then when I explored, I went, holy moly, there's a lot more than I actually know out there. And it's great. It's a great discovery, you know, of our true purpose of being.
Yeah, and so for me, when I tried marijuana for the first time, I read 5 books about it before even like thinking about it, because that's how I roll, right? And now it's legal, you know, in various places and countries, and it's like it's a growing trend. I think psilocybin will be legal soon. There is debate about that, and hopefully yes, because the idea of treating all drugs the same way, it's like treating all alcohol the same way. It's okay to drink beer and wine. It's okay also to drink harder stuff, but it's again in moderation. But there's a difference. A beer is not the same as a bottle of tequila, right? So we have to keep the perspective in mind and look at the research and the studies. And I think people are just too scared. They hear the word drug and they run away.
Yeah, that's why we call it medicine. It comes from Mother Earth. It was created out in the forest. It's here
but so are pharmaceutical drugs. I mean, they are drugs as well that are harmful, that are addictive. And we seem to ignore that or turn a blind eye to that, again, for different reasons. I understand why it's happening, right? But we have to, again, there's a choice there. And we have a choice to be informed, a choice to make a decision and to try things out. And if something is not working, find another path or try another path.
Yeah. Don't keep trying the same thing over and over again, because you don't succeed that way. And get outside the box.
If you really look at like what mushrooms do in the natural setting, they decompose that which no longer serves, and then that whole entire decomposition process fuels that next stage of growth. So if we didn't actually have fungus, if we didn't have fungi such as mushrooms, like there would be like so much natural debris in the forests that we wouldn't be able to actually walk through them and enjoy them. So then we turn that to the human being, and it helps you to decompose. Like, I believe that every single human being is on the planet for a journey of enlightenment in varying degrees. And so what is enlightenment? We have a greater ability to channel light, a greater ability to increase our quotient, our capacity to channel light. And that's essentially what mushrooms do, is that they help you decompose any thoughts, feelings, emotions, habits of how you operate on a daily basis. And then you get to make that conscious decision afterwards to be like, I don't want to think like that anymore. I don't want to feel like that anymore. I don't want to act like that anymore. And then as a result, you can take that energy and nourish your purpose, nourish your passions, and really live like a deeply fulfilling life.
It's like spotlight, and you just change the direction and focus on something else. And it's natural. I mean, that's the point too that's being made here. It's natural. We're okay with chemicals, but we're not okay with natural stuff. I mean, what's going on? Yeah. I was checking your website, and there you both have mantras. I just want to briefly touch upon that. So, Rob, your mantra is reconnect to soul's remembering, right? So that's really cool. Would you like to explain a bit? What do you mean by that?
Definitely, yeah. And there's a bit of a story behind that too, because during my very first journey, the night of the second ceremony, it was a solo journey, and it was just myself and the medicine man, and we had a lot of conversations that evening, and it makes me a little bit emotional because was like during that process of just having those high level, deep conversations. So they were high level and they were very, very deep and profound. And I was just like, these are the conversations that I want to be having with people. These are the conversations I want to be having with our clients. And so in that, there was a profound discovery, like we've just forgotten. So if we've just forgotten what it's truly like to be a human being on Earth in this infinite cosmos that we're in, then what am I here to remember?
Yeah, and a lot of it is illusion too. We think this is the real thing, but it's not. So yeah, I love that. Thank you. And your mantra would just be, Gary. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's simple and it's on the back of my running shoes.
Yeah, yeah.
It is. It's just be here, be now, be seen. You seeing others, being present, observing. It's all about here and now. And it's like, just be, you know. People say, well, how can you just be? It's like, well, stop getting out of the monkey chatter that's going in your head and try to come back to self and your feelings and your thoughts. In some ways, it's easier to come back to just, can you hear your heartbeat? That brings you back to you. So that just be is like, oh, I need to listen to me and my heart. And from there, I can move forward.
Because I find also I'm most me when I'm calm and relaxed.
Yes.
And so, but the thing is also, I'm glad you didn't include yourself, just be yourself, but simply just be, because that yourself might be something else or a projection, as you're saying, but just be like that state. That's who I am. And that's who I am at this moment. I was in the past, I will be in the future, and then all those things. So time kind of also disappears then.
And tomorrow's going to be a different just be. Totally.
Exactly. So thank you for being on Rash's World. So we have Rob Grover and Gary Logan. You're founders of the Journeymen Collective. You have luxury guided psychedelic retreats in the mountains of BC. Whereabouts? Can we have a bit more information? Would you like
we're
to share?
in the Okanagan Valley.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
British Columbia. So Kelowna would be like a marker for people to sort of like know on a map where that is.
Wonderful. Right. Thank you so much for being here. Such a pleasure to talk to you, and the best of luck.
Thank you. This was great. Thanks for having us on your show.
Yeah.